Let's start by understanding what a clone is. Many people have heard of the word clone before. It means the exact copy of something. Maybe you know it from Star Wars, Attack of the Clones, or the first cloned sheep, Dolly. In plants, it is quite simple. If you cut a shoot from a vine and plant it, another vine will grow that is identical to the first, exactly the same, a clone. Remember how we learnt about the different varieties that fall under Vitis vinifera? Well, each of those varieties, like Merlot, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, will develop their own characteristics and traits over time. So, if a farmer has a vineyard full of Chardonnay vines, but sees that some of them produce better fruit than others, he can take and replant cuttings from these vines so that the new vineyard will only be made up of the best vines. When this is done by the farmer, it is called massal selection. If it is done in a laboratory, it's called clonal selection. It takes many years for clones to be grown and made ready to be sold to wine producers. But this means that different clones will be suited to different conditions. So a winemaker has to decide not only which variety to plant, but which clone of that variety. Basically, clones are just types of vines where the characteristics are known either by the farmer who has tended his vineyards for years or by companies that have created the clones in a laboratory. Now let's take a closer look at the roots and a remarkable story about the near destruction of the entire worldwide wine industry. Roots anchor plants to the ground, recover nutrients, minerals and water from the soil, and store energy. They are vital to any plant's survival. And in the mid-19th century, the roots of the Vitis vinifera varieties came under a vicious attack. Back then, wine was being made all over the world, and France was by far the world's biggest producer. The wine industry was happy and healthy. Then one day, the French noticed a new vine disease. Inexplicably, their vines slowly began to die. Each year, an infected vine would get sicker and sicker, producing less and less fruit until it died altogether. The disease spread faster than the time it took for winemakers to uproot infected vines. In France alone, vines that would have covered an area the size of Palestine, 2.5 million hectares, had to be pulled up. It was a race against time for scientists trying to discover the cause of the disease. By 1869, they had discovered that an aphid known as Phylloxera was the cause of this terrible disease. The almost microscopic insect fed off the vine's roots. Phylloxera would move into a root and breed, with every generation eating more and more of the vine's roots, eventually killing the whole plant. The insect arrived in Europe from America as wealthy Victorians built extensive gardens filled with exotic plants from all over the world. In one of the shipments, a few Phylloxera stowaways must have made it to Europe from North America. They must have been the happiest insects in the world, as all of Europe's vineyards suddenly became an all-you-can-eat Phylloxera buffet. Desperate, the French government offered a cash prize to the first person to come up with a solution to the Phylloxera epidemic. Flooding was an early solution. If vineyards were flooded for a few weeks in the winter, the pests would drown and could be controlled. But not enough vineyards were close enough to water or planted on flat enough ground for this to work. There were also many crazy ideas. One was to plant a live toad next to each vine. The toads were supposed to draw out the poison, but all that happened was a lot of unnecessary toad deaths. Poor toads. As scientists tried to find a final solution to the Phylloxera, the annual production of wine in France fell from 84 million hectolitres in 1875 to only 23 million hectolitres in 1889. Wine drinkers across the world were out of luck. Then came a savior from across the Atlantic. As the aphids had arrived from America, scientists wanted to know how different vines in America could resist Phylloxera. They found that many American vine varieties, different from Vitis vinifera, were not affected by the aphid. The solution was simple. Winemakers had to graft or attach the top half of the European Vitis vinifera vine varieties onto the roots of the Phylloxera-resistant American vine varieties. In this way, they could carry on growing the types of grapes they wanted, while making sure Phylloxera didn't kill their vines. The Phylloxera buffet was closed. The plan had worked, but the next task was huge. Nearly all the vines in the world had to be uprooted and new grafted vines planted in their place. Today, nearly all the vineyards in the world are planted this way, but this has meant that winemakers now have another choice. Not only do they need to decide which varieties of grape and clone to use, but also what type of rootstock to use, because different roots will have different effects on the vine. And the choices for a winemaker are only just getting started. As we are going to learn in the next few lessons, winemakers also need to decide where they are going to plant their grapes, because the weather, soil, and geography of this spot will have a big effect on how grapes grow or ripen, which, as we know, will have a big effect on flavor.